All Agile teams work in time-boxed iterations. Most of the iterations teams execute are development sprints. These are self-explanatory. You're building valuable increments of your product. Some, though, can have a special purpose to meet specific needs. For instance, there are 2 iteration types that are completely optional. They're up to you and your team to decide if you need them. They're Iteration 0 and Iteration H. In Iteration 0, you're setting aside time to get the foundational elements set up completely, so when Iteration 1, your first development iteration, starts, the team can immediately start building value without distractions. In Iteration 0, you'll be identifying resources, setting up workspaces, setting up development and test environments, establishing the vision, and doing your normal early planning. This sprint can be as long or as short as you need it to be. For example, maybe you're setting up a brand new team to complete a product using a development language that's new to you. During Iteration 0, you'll identify your team, do any hiring and training needed, and set up all the development tools they'll need to begin delivering value in Iteration 1. A hardening iteration, Iteration H, is a different optional iteration. In Iteration H, you're hardening or finalizing your release contents. Your team is doing any final steps necessary to ensure your release is ready to move to production. Usually, this iteration has the same time box as your development iterations, only your purpose is different. Many teams use this to complete extra testing, finalize user and system documentation, or whatever is needed to stabilize your code. At the end of Iteration H, you're releasing this valuable increment of your product. There are additional iteration types you can use as well. These are focused on identifying risk and trying to mitigate them upfront. These fall into the category of spike iterations, and they come in 2 flavors: architectural spike and risk-based spike. Let's talk about them. The architectural spike is usually shorter than your normal iteration length, generally only a week, but sometimes 2 if you have longer iterations. The purpose is to answer the question, can we do this? Essentially, an architectural spike is a proof of concept build that will tell the team early on if the selected technology will work. For example, maybe it's cost-effective for your company to begin using an open-source database for their web applications. You could do an architectural spike to prove that this free database will work. Next, let's talk about risk-based spikes. These are pretty self-explanatory, but in a nutshell, these are shorter than your normal development sprints, and they test unfamiliar or new technologies early on. Let's look at an example of building an ATM machine. You have a requirement that a photograph check on a smartphone can be an acceptable form of deposit. One of the key risks is whether you can interface between a mobile device and your old system, so you execute a risk-based spike to make sure you can. If you can't, well, you need a new solution. If a new solution is needed, you may want to do an architectural spike to prove it will work. Sometimes your proof of concept efforts aren't successful. That's okay. You've reached a state known as fast failure. It sounds bad, but it's really a good thing. You've learned early what won't work, and now the resources can be directed to something that will work. The whole point of flexing your Agile is to customize it to your needs. You'll use different iteration types to prove early on what you're building will work. You're proving to your team and all your stakeholders that your project is on the right track.